And away we go. It's the DFS Silverbird presented by Awesemo.com. Dan Strafford and Adam Scherer along with you on this Saturday morning, getting ready for two different slates, a 5-game early, a 10-game late slate. We're going to talk Major League Baseball, but as always, want to check in and find out what Adam feels about the NFL. How do you feel, Adam, about Antonio Brown not wanting to wear a helmet that actually protects his head? What are your thoughts on that?
The whole story is amazing.
Isn't it? It's like as if Sports Talk Radio had a baby and it birthed this forward and said, enjoy. It's mind-blowing.
Right. Because like Lofty and I talked about it on the deep dive yesterday, or deeper dive, and I knew what was going on, but I hadn't read the full 20 tweet thread from whoever it was that tweeted it out. And I went back and read it later, and it was just there's so much in there. I mean, there was the part about him painting his helmet to try and make people think it was the correct helmet.
That's something my child would do. That's something my kid would be like, "Oh, Dad, listen, I painted my helmet because I didn't want to wear the new one."
It's so ridiculous that later on in that tweet thread, there is the sentence, he is distracted in meetings because he is perusing his bank accounts and liking pictures on Instagram. And that didn't even get any attention because it just wasn't even close to as insane as the helmet thing.
And let's be honest, who doesn't get distracted by the bank accounts, but usually because mine's in a negative.
Right.
It's not because it's like multiple digits, 6 figures. It's because I'm like, oh, wait, I need to move money from somewhere else, which I don't have, and move it over. Listen,
right.
Antonio Brown will be playing football this year. There's no way he walks away from what he leveraged with the Steelers. It's going to happen, but it is a fun story in August. I will admit I was on vacation for a week, and I checked in on the Twitter, and play-by-play of preseason games from fantasy analysts may be the worst thing ever. I like to position myself as a fantasy nerd and as a bit of an analyst, not a tout, but an analyst. It's just stop, guys. Just let the games happen. Do analysis after the fact. Do what you have to do, but I don't need play-by-play as it's happening telling me you're right about X player who may not even make the roster. But there's that. We're here, though, to talk about Major League Baseball. There are plenty of weeks left. And I want to ask you that, Adam, at the top here. We were talking before we started recording, but as we talk about when to get into DFS, what to play, what tournaments to play, how to manage your bankroll, is August baseball kind to you? Do you find it softer because players are starting to play more NFL and they pay less attention to baseball? Are you changing the way you approach it? Is there anything different about August or September baseball in your point of view than maybe May or June baseball, as it were?
It should be harder. I've always had success in August, which I think is weird. I mean, most of the people still playing have had some success. Otherwise, they're tired of playing MLB DFS, and they're just waiting for football. So I think it should be harder. On cash games, like if you post head-to-heads, at least I've noticed lately that my head-to-heads are not getting taken by anyone. I'm just getting auto-matched with other regulars, which isn't the case in the first month of the year. But as far as tournaments go, I've actually had August has been probably my best month historically.
So do you take a different approach, or is this just simply you're sticking with what you've done all along and August bears better fruit?
Yeah, just sticking with it and happened to run good during August, I guess. September is when it gets a little bit different because you get the September call-ups and it just becomes, I think, more of a pain than anything because there's not like a whole lot that you can do to mitigate the fact that guys are going to get pulled for pinch runners, in the 6th inning and stuff like that. But that's where, I think it starts to change.
And it makes sense. And I have long been, and I am not going to go on a rant as a la EMAC just because I'm filling in, but as a season-long player, I hate September call-ups. I just think they screw around with season-long, and I think they screw around with DFS as well. But we can talk about that on a different time. We do have a 5-game early. We're going to talk about the 10-game late. Always know that Awesemo.com has all your content covered. If you want to go behind the paywall, and I would suggest that you do, that is Awesemo Plus. That gives you the projections, which is not just projections for individual players, but for ownership as well. That is with a promo code EARLYBIRD, one word, gets you 50% off your first month. You also get all the premium articles and so on and so forth. If you just want the free stuff, and bless you if you do, that's over on YouTube. Typically, you get the MLB DFS strategy show. That's in the mornings, and then you get the deeper dive, and you get live before lock. So you'll want to subscribe to our YouTube DFS channel. You'll want to also click that alarm bell, so every time we go live, you are aware of it. You want to leave a comment, leave a rating. We appreciate that on this video, especially because I'm filling in for EMAC. We want more likes than a typical EMAC video gets, right, Adam? That's how this works?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you want to click that like button and even tell a friend, just even if they don't watch a video, just come click the like button so EMAC knows I am better than he is. But we're going to dive in. We're going to go through pitching quickly. We'll talk about some of the top stacks that Adam has at this early stage, and then we'll move on to the night slate. We have 5 games on the early. It's a 3:07 start on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I'll try to touch on some Yahoo where we can. Obviously, this podcast brought to you in part by Yahoo DFS. And I've said this many times, stay tuned for NFL over there. They're going to do some fun things with management free stuff, also overlay. You'll want to be tuned in there. But Adam, 5-game slate: Yankees, Toronto, Angels, Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Kansas City, Detroit, Atlanta, Miami. Quick first glance: San Francisco, Miami, both good pitchers parks. We know that. We got Soroka and Samardzija as our 2 most expensive pitchers on DK. Soroka checks in at 10-4, Samardzija at 9-2. Then you get good old Spencer Turnbull at 8K. And then we go from there. We'll check in on some of the pitchers. Any interest or any breakdown of Soroka, Samardzija, and Turnbull as our 3 most expensive options on DK?
What a slate.
Yes.
Yeah, like Soroka's good, but he's not a strikeout guy. He's got a good matchup, but he's probably – it feels like he's been the most aggressively priced pitcher probably in the industry this year, as far as like sites have just given you no room for upside with him unless you happen to get, a complete game shutout or something from him. 10-4 is a really tough price to pay, but he is really good and in a good spot. So, I guess you can make an argument for it on the 5-game slate. Samardzija at home, against Philly, just a little more expensive than I would like. Turnbull's kind of interesting. Kansas City's lineup outside of the top 4 is, really bad. And Turnbull has been good against right-handed hitters this year, which kind of covers Merrifield, Soler, and Dozier out of the 4 good hitters on the team. 76 pitches last start. They had said that he was going to be limited to around 76 pitches. So I would think that he maybe gets to around 90 or something here. He could be a pretty decent option against KC.
All right, as we continue on to get into some names that we've dealt with before, Andrew Heaney is listed as the Angel starter. He's expected to make the start coming off of the injured list with a shoulder injury, so length could be a definite issue there. Rick Porcello on the other side at 7,500. Vince Velasquez, we've seen some strikeout upside from him. He's against San Francisco at 7,400. And then we have Rogaspak and Alcantara above 6K. Are we making a case for Samardzija and Velasquez in San Francisco simply based on park on a lesser slate here with 5 games?
Velasquez for sure, because he's reasonably priced. The matchup against the Giants is good. And he does have good strikeout stuff. He's been working up in the zone lately too, which should bode well for him with the stuff that he has. But the park just does such a good job of mitigating home runs, which is Velasquez's biggest issue. And he's cheap enough where he doesn't need to strike out 8 to 10 guys to really pay off his salary. So at first glance, I think Velasquez is my favorite pitcher on the slate.
Yeah, and I hate, not that I hate to agree with you, I hate to agree on Vince Velasquez, but the park, I agree. I love that you agreed with that. But it's just the park and the matchup makes so much sense for what Velasquez can do. The price point on DraftKings, we'll pull up FanDuel here. Velasquez at 7,500, single pitcher site. Does that change your analysis any way for Velasquez against the San Francisco Giants?
It would depend on the rest of the options. I'm trying to get.
I'll pull it quickly. So Soroka is 9K, Samardzija 83, Wogaspak is 7,600. And then Porcello, Tanaka are cheaper than Velasquez.
Yeah, so
And
Tanaka,
Turnbull 6,200 to point that out.
right? Yeah, so Turnbull will be really interesting, but I still think Velasquez is probably the best play there. I'm also seeing Tanaka listed on one site, but not on others. So
I will check. We'll Google and we'll make sure we are on point with what the Yankees have on tap for the early slate here. Let's see. I have a Chad Green Cortez pair on DK FanDuel, and ESPN have Tanaka. So let's
seems like
see.
it should probably be Tanaka.
And it's not a doubleheader because the 307 start, unless the Blue Jays wouldn't do it.
So Tanaka's next start will come Sunday against the Blue Jays. Brian Hoke of MLB.com reports.
All right, so to point out, we have Chad Green and Cortez as our two starters, and Cortez is 4K. So we have Mike Montgomery for Casey, Alcantara is 6,500, Wogesback is 6,700. Cortez against a Toronto Blue Jays team that we've targeted many times before is 4K cheap enough for you to consider Nectar Cortez against the Blue Jays. He's 5-0. That's amazing. If ever you need an example of how the win means nothing, Cortez is 5-0 for the Yankees on the year. But anyway, I digress. Any interest in Cortez at the sub-flat minimum over on DK?
The only reason would be because of how atrocious the pitching on this slate is and the fact that DK priced up the good pitchers. So if you can just get 8 to 10 points from Cortez and then get whatever bats you want, it becomes pretty appealing. But it's not like, he had like that one really, really good outing earlier in the year. But he was fully stretched out then. Now he's just going on like 3 days rest every day. So you really shouldn't expect more than 40 to maybe 50 pitches here.
He's 5,500 over on FanDuel. I'm with you, and I'm the resident Yankee fan, as I just don't think this is a spot where Cortez will have a ton of upside. And honestly, I'd probably look at some Blue Jays bats from a power right side. You have Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero and the future of that Blue Jays franchise in the mix. Offenses on a 5-game slate. Anything stand out to you as where at least your first inclination leaned?
Yankees against Wogesbach is a good spot. Who knows what hitters will be in the lineup, but it doesn't really seem to matter lately. Also, I think I think that the Braves are interesting because it is a bad park, and Alcantara I think could end up being decent in the future. But out of all qualified starters, he actually has the worst xFIP in baseball right now, and it's an Atlanta team that we know just has a lot of power. So at first glance, I think the Yankees and the Braves, and also the Angels. Rick Porcello is trash.
I know I talked about it when Stroman was dealt, and I don't know who it was with, whether it's Laffey or Rendon, but about the fact that everyone on the Toronto Blue Jays staff had an xFIP over 4.5. Like it's bad news for the rest of that staff. And Stroman, the Mets ended up winning as we record on Friday night. Struggled a little bit in that, did have some strikeouts, but Stroman is not necessarily the greatest pitcher in the world. But this has been a struggle for the Toronto Blue Jays, and they're absolutely looking towards the future. Let's turn the page, and we'll look at this late slate, or I guess I should say main slate on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I'll check out some Yahoo prices momentarily, as well as typically they run a lot of full-day slates, as it were. And Adam and I will quickly go through the top pitching options on DK, and we'll sprinkle in some FanDuel here as we roll along. We do have at the top end, Charlie Morton is 11.9, Patrick Corbin 11.2, Noah Syndergaard is 10.5. You have Paddock at 9.6, Kyle Hendricks at 9.2. So let's go 9K and above here, Adam. We have Morton against Seattle, which I am still confounded at the fact that I think Seattle started the season at something like 15-2. Like, it was some insane start to the year for the Mariners, and they have been one of the worst teams since then. Morton obviously has had a very solid year, but he's up at 11.9. Corbin against the Mets, 11.2. The Mets win on a Michael Conforto walk-off on Friday night. Syndergaard gets Washington on the other side. Clearly some great bats in that lineup when you get to Juan Soto and Rendon. And then you get Paddock against Colorado. This is in San Diego. I know it's not necessarily the pitcher's park it was 7 or 8 years ago, but still a good one. Colorado outside of Coors Field. And then Hendricks against Cincinnati. Don't have a lot of love for him at 9-2. Anybody here in this mix that stands out to you as tournament-wise, cash-wise, somebody you want to point out in these top 5 pitchers on DK?
I think Paddock really stands out. He has had a couple of rough starts recently, and he has the issue of never going 100 pitches. But when you look at the pricing, and you're getting a $2,300 discount from Charlie Morton to Paddock, or a $1,600 discount from Corbin to Paddock, I think it becomes really appealing against a Colorado team that is really, really bad outside of Coors Field. I don't really have interest in Syndergaard. The Nats don't strike out a lot. They have speed. It's a spot where Trey Turner is it's a triple anytime Trey Turner gets on base, and that goes for a couple other guys in the lineup too. So it's just the pricing is really, really sharp at the top. Like, I would love to get to Morton, but I don't think that he's worth $2,300 more than Paddock. So Paddock would be the one above 9K that really stands out.
It seems that analysis would stand firm over on FanDuel, where Morton is 11K and Paddock is down at 8,400. So you're getting a similar sharp discount from Morton all the way down to Paddock. Any of these other names, if we project out ownership projections, which we are not right now, this is not official Osmo information from an ownership projection standpoint, but if Osmo.com projects out that you're getting single-digit ownership on one of these more expensive pitchers, is there anyone who might be worth a tournament pivot from your point of view?
It's tough because of the price range. Like, it's not – you can't just say, like, oh, Paddock's popular, right, switch to Morton, because you're also giving up, like, 2.5 bats. So – like if Morton's really low owned, he becomes interesting because you could just really overpay and get what is still likely to be the top scoring pitcher on the slate. And there are a couple of cheap arm, or at least one cheap arm that's interesting. So, I could see that, but I think it's more likely that I either just don't go to the top range or I just load up on Paddock.
Right. So if we were talking cash games versus tournaments, probably a bit of a difference there on where you could get, but makes total sense on how you break that down. Sub 9K, we get Jake Odorizzi against Cleveland. Sonny Gray, who I am a huge fan of. I know you have been on the bandwagon as well. Gets the Cubs in Cincinnati. Tanner Roark against the the White Sox at 8,200. And then Tommy Malone is at 8K. Let's take that small group quickly. Odorizzi, Gray, Roark, Malone. Anyone in there that would be on your radar for this slate?
Of course, Sonny Gray. He's got the second highest strikeout percentage on the entire slate. He's third highest behind Morton and Corbin. 27.8% strikeout percentage. 3.57 xFIP is second best to everyone except for Corbin. Just a really good pitcher. And, the Cubs are good. They added another bat in Castellanos. The ballpark is tough for pitchers, but once again, you probably won't get much ownership on Gray, and he's still underpriced. So it's factoring in the matchup. Like, he's a $10,000 pitcher, and he's never actually there. So I'm sure I'll get to a bunch of Sonny Gray once again. I totally forgot that Tanner Roark was traded to Oakland.
Yep.
I was actually thinking the other day, because Cincinnati's put together a staff of like all of my favorite pitchers, and I was thinking the other day that they just need to get rid of Roark, and I'd be happy. And totally forgot he wasn't there anymore. But obviously a good spot for him too against the White Sox. Not a pitcher that I'm a big fan of, but taking guys against the White Sox, it makes me think that there's a good chance Sonny Gray's ownership is low, because people will just say, oh, Roark against the White Sox, how can I not take that? And I can just take the much better pitcher.
And here's the thing. Sonny Gray on this podcast can never be disparaged. So we're going to be fine with any Sonny Gray analysis. I'm right there with you, and I think on DK makes a ton of sense. And again, Osmo.com has ownership projections. And I will admit, and maybe Alex or any of the guys over there may not, but it's not 100% accurate, nor is any projection. But it gives you a sense of how you should take approach to certain lineup construction and what close to lock you should be understanding about how your lineup construction is coming together. So if Gray is minimally owned, the upside's there. And I think Gray on this slate, to Adam's point, will have very low ownership. And with what we have with Roark there, and you have Paddock and Syndergaard against Washington. I think strikeouts are there, so people might lean in that direction. You're going to have some upside with Sonny Gray on the slate against the Cubs. The Cubs' strikeout percentage is low against righties, but, Gray handles them very well. So maybe you get some upside in that matchup. If we go sub 8K, you get Wainwright, Maeda, Alex Young against the Dodgers. Ronaldo Lopez does get an Oakland A's team that has more than a few strikeouts in it, but against righties has righted the ship on the year. Their active roster just at 21.1% against right-handed pitchers on the season. And as we roll through, you get down to names like Payano, and we do get, well, let's leave that for later. I do want to get your take on this. So let's go Wainwright, Maeda, Young, Lopez, Payano. Anybody in that mix between 8 and 7K that you think is worthwhile to mention on this podcast?
Not really. Wainwright's got a really tough matchup against Pittsburgh. Kenta Maeda is going to throw who knows how many pitches, and it's not a great strikeout matchup against Arizona. I think that he's reasonable, but I probably won't get a ton. Payano, not in a great spot against Milwaukee. He's fully stretched out for whatever that's worth, but still just not a great spot. Tommy Malone's more expensive than I would like. And Ronaldo Lopez, I think the spot against Oakland, on one hand, it's nice because Oakland has a lot of right-handed hitters, and Lopez does have much better strikeout stuff against righties. But on the other hand, surprisingly, not a ton of strikeouts in the lineup, but more importantly, a ton of power. And Lopez gives up a lot of power to both sides of the plate. It's a nice park shift for the Oakland bats. So I don't think I'll really get to much of any of that group.
All right. What's interesting here for me, sub 7K, is we get Aaron Sanchez and read into the move to the Houston Astros rotation and what he did first time out against the Seattle Mariners. 6 Ks, 2 walks, 92 pitches, 6 ground balls, outs. This was a game that sort of gave all of those spin rate aficionados a big, as Lofty often says, trouser action, because Sanchez has been the guy that in Toronto, I often thought he should be the closer. You saw, I think it was 4 years ago now, when he first came up, that he was in line to be their closer. They moved him to the rotation. He's been back and forth ever since. Injuries and whatnot have gone on from there. He's on this slate at 6,900, coming off a very solid start. He gets the Orioles, and we know all of the problems going on with Baltimore, Chris Davis trying to fight the manager and whatever strikeout problems they have. Is Aaron Sanchez at 6,900 an option on this slate?
Yeah, I'll have a ton. I've always wanted him to be so much better than
exactly. Yep.
He has really, really, really good stuff. He throws hard. He's got a good curveball. He last year stole a changeup from Marco Estrada that had some of the nastiest movement of any changeup. But he's just never figured out how to make his stuff actually be good. And that's everyone with Houston talks about the spin rate because they do whatever they do to increase that. But the other thing that they do,
pine tar. They do pine tar. That's what.
The other thing that makes the pitchers that go there so much better is that they optimize their pitch mixes and basically just have them throw their best pitches and stop throwing specifically two-seam fastballs. That's what happened with Garrett Cole. He had a two-seam fastball that basically he was pitching the contact, and they were like, okay, just turn that into a slider and throw your slider every time you want to throw your two-seam fastball. And he became the best strikeout pitcher in baseball right now. And in Sanchez's first start, I'm not sure what the exact number is because I've seen some tweets during that start saying that he was down around 10 to 15% usage on his two-seamer. On Brooks Baseball, it has him throwing 0 in that start, and it has him with 52% four-seam fastballs, which is easily his highest of the season. A bunch of curveballs, too. So if Houston basically was like, look, throw your changeup, throw your curveball, throw four-seam fastballs, and just stop throwing this pitch that sucks, he's going to immediately be better. And he's at a price point right now and in a favorable matchup where we don't need him to be an ace. We just need him to be better than he was in Toronto.
Right. And I think that makes so much sense in the analysis and how, one, the Astros got to trading for him with the option, but also where he might be sub 7K on a site like DK when we talk about their price, how they sort of promote and I guess inflate is the word I'm looking for. Inflate prices. Sanchez at that price point makes a ton of sense. Over on FanDuel is 8,200, so he's a little bit pricier. Remember, there's not exactly a dollar to dollar crossover there, but he does make sense on FanDuel as well. Want to ask you though, Musgrove, Plutko, any interest in those other two names at the sub 7K price point?
Yeah, some interest in Musgrove. I think he probably makes more sense on FanDuel since he's, you don't have Aaron Sanchez down there, although you do have Kenta Maeda at 6,700. So I guess Musgrove still takes a backseat. Not a great strikeout pitcher, just kind of a run-of-the-mill guy. And the Cardinals are getting healthier. So on some slates, I would say that Musgrove would be like my primary SP2. But I think that on this one, it would be Sanchez.
Anybody on the cheap end? We have Chichi Gonzalez for the Colorado Rockies. You have Hauser and Brooks for the for the Baltimore Orioles. Anybody on the really cheap end of the pool on DK or FanDuel who stands out as a potential, filler on a GPP winning team?
Adrian Hauser, if you have to. I don't love it, but he is stretched out. He threw 89 pitches in his last start. He's nothing special, but he's not terrible. And Texas, without Joey Gallo and without a designated hitter, isn't really the worst matchup right now.
All right, quickly here, your favorite offenses on this slate would seem pretty straightforward where we may go when you get San Diego against Gonzalez. You have Seattle running out a starter, or I should say an opener, and then the bullpen. What are your favorite offenses on this night slate, or main slate, I should say, on Saturday?
Minnesota against Plutko, who just gives up plenty of power to both sides of the plate. Minnesota's got a lot of it. They don't strike out. So really, really dangerous spot for him. And then there's another one. And Oakland against Lopez.
That inspired a lot of confidence, I would say. There's another one somewhere.
Well, I was looking up Plutko's numbers and just totally forgot the other offense.
That's fair. It happens. It happens to the best of us as we roll through and you get a ton of content and you're trying to figure out exactly where you're leaning. This will be a fun night slate. I think the early slate is a little bit more ugly than the night slate. So enjoy that one. I will remind you that we get the MLB strategy show on Saturday mornings. You get the deeper dive and you get the live before lock. Typically on Saturdays, you get a scrub down version of those. Always can log in if you are a member to Slack chat. You can get the schedule over there over on Osmo.com. You find Adam on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. If you want to track him over on FanDuel, it is I'm a Boss. So just take that for what it's worth. If I don't say that on a podcast I host with Adam, I get fined. So I need to throw that in there. Find me on Twitter at Dan Strafford. Adam, as we close out this podcast, and I do genuinely mean this, you've had a what seems like a fairly solid MLB season if you look at sort of the GPP winnings, but MLB is a tough, long slog. So you've been doing your projections, you've been focusing on stats, you've been doing the day in, day out. If someone were listening to this podcast for the first time, how do you approach August baseball? Is it any different? I know we talked about this at the top, but specifically today's slate, moving forward, is it any different for you, or is this simply locking in, looking at the stats, and understanding where you're going?
Yeah, it's still the same for me. I guess like the one change as you get further into the year is I spend even less time digging. Like early in the season, there are some pitchers where they'll perform differently than you expect, and so you're kind of trying to be the first one to figure out what they're doing differently. At this point in the year, for the most part, they are what they are. And so, I guess I trust projections even more at this point. But as an MME player, I pretty much trust them anyway. So not a whole lot changes for me.
Right. And that makes sense. And for those of you who are looking for projections, Osmo.com has them. They have projections for your MME, but they also have the lineup builder, which Alex provides his grade specifically for players and for value. That gets you in to build single generation lineups. So if you just want to build 1, 3, 5, 10 lineups, you can do that over at the lineup builder. All of that is available with the promo code EARLYBIRD, gets you 50% off your first month. I will say that on Monday morning, maybe me and Lofty, I may have to get coverage because I think my wife has some friends coming to visit on Sunday night, but we'll figure that out at a later date. You get somebody Monday morning. You'll hear us for the rest of the week over at the podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell, make sure you are alerted every time we go live. That is very much important. With that said, wish you the best of luck on both slates on Saturday. We'll be back with you right here on the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com.